Welcome back to America Decides. Thanks for staying around with us. It's no secret Latino vote and voters could have a big voice in who our next president is. Now, a new documentary is going inside the effort to reach Latino voters via a kind of retro technology, radio.
Latino radio gets particular attention from the Democratic Party, where the majority of Latinos traditionally land, though data suggests they are slowly losing voters to the GOP. Radio is huge in Latino communities. According to Nielsen, 97% of Latinos tune in every week to listen to Latino-focused radio or Spanish-language radio. They listen to Latin music, gossip, sports, news, plenty of opinion, and politics.
Soledad O'Brien joins us now via Zoom from the Beige Room. She is host of Matter of Fact with Soledad O'Brien and the producer for War on La Radio. Soledad, it's great to see you. You went to Pennsylvania, which is super important, 7% registered voters there, Latino. Talk to me about this week in not only this larger conversation about what's going to happen in Pennsylvania, but to Latino voters specifically.
Yeah, it really centers around the importance of the Latino vote, which is really what we wanted to explore in our documentary. I mean, imagine 97% of a community listen to the radio every single week. And that's partly because of the jobs that working class Latinos hold, right? Latinos over-index in America's working class. So you're looking at, 38% of maintenance workers, 36% of construction workers, 27% of folks who prep food, 78% of farm workers. All those jobs, you might note, are kind of often have the radio going on in the background. And so both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, there's been this kind of war over the radio waves in order to try to get the Latino vote. We were very interested in the wake of all that has unfolded in the past couple of days in what will the impact be on the Latino voter, because the voter is really, really important. U.S. Latinos account for 50% of new eligible voters. 70% of Latinos who are polled say they're going to vote. And once they're registered, the number of Latinos who vote is between 80 and 88%, right? So this mythology around Latinos don't vote, true until they're registered, then they really do vote. So the big question is, how will these comments really impact voters? We spoke to a DJ, Victor Martinez is a DJ on La Mega, and he calls it a gift from God, basically, Donald Trump's comments, saying that he basically thinks, listen, there's 500,000 Latinos of Puerto Rican descent in the state of Pennsylvania, where La Mega is based. And he's like, you couldn't ask as a Democrat for anything better. We have a couple of folks who are in the dock who are on the West Coast, Nevada, swing state as well, who said it's not really resonating quite as much in Nevada. Steve Sanchez, who's a radio host in Nevada, said, people are kind of the people he's talking to who listen to his show, and he skews right to the right, would say that they're kind of laughing it off, that they don't think it's as serious as opposed to folks who are more on the East Coast and in the state of Pennsylvania. So an impact for sure.
And Soledad, briefly, Latino is an umbrella term, but it's a diaspora. And you mentioned Puerto Ricans, those of Mexican descent, Guatemalan, Dominican. I mean, it's a lot. Cuban, right. Walk us through that briefly.
Yeah, so I think that it is this overall term, but what's been very interesting to see in some of the early early polls, which of course, as you well know, are not always super reliable, is that even though the comments were very disparaging, racist, I would say, toward Puerto Ricans, there are lots of Latinos who would say, wow, this actually is impacting them as well, that they feel like Mike Madrid, who's a consultant often for the Republican Party, would say, we feel like it impacts Latinos as a whole because they see themselves in that insult, even if they're not Puerto Rican. And I think that is a real risk to Republicans in swing states. Remember, the margin of victory in those states is so small. The growth of Latinos in those states is so large and so fast, any even small impact could really throw a race, one way or the other.
I want to pick up on your reference to Mike Madrid, because you spoke to him about this movement of some Latinos toward the Republican Party. Let's listen to that.
The Democratic Party is becoming a whiter, wealthier, more college-educated party. And as a result, the issues that animate that demographic tend to be far more cultural. Abortion issues, gun control issues, climate change, marriage equality. These are all legitimate, good issues. Most of them I agree with. But that's
almost sound like a Democrat.
I sound like a Latino is what I sound like. and that we're neither Democrat nor Republican is what I'm realizing, is we don't feel at home in either party. The Latino voter is the moderate, quantifiably in both parties. We are much less hyper-partisan. We are much less extreme. We are much more focused on economic issues that we have typically identified with politicians in this country's history, and much less.
Evaluate that for us, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's over the years I've done 50 zillion panels, usually about the Latino vote for every election that I've covered, and I've covered a bunch. And the way it would generally work would that you get called out, and it would be like Soledad and Maria Elena and Juan and Jose. You know, let's talk about the Latino vote. Let's talk about the immigration. When actually what you find in lots of polling is that Latinos are very much like everybody else. It's actually economy. Like if you had to rank 1, 2, and 3 about the issues they care about, it's economy, then economy, then economy. Now, immigration might be a subset under the economy, but the economy is the real issue. And I think actually both campaigns often miss that. Mike Madrid would say, you know, that what you're seeing now is that Latinos are moving away from Trump. And while they're open to be sort of courted by either party, there's a lot of revulsion, especially when it comes to these comments. And it's going to be very interesting. I mean, really, you never can tell for sure until after the election and really analyze the results. But he sees a very big impact potentially.
And Soledad, very briefly, on this idea of Latino men being a potentially important subconstituency for Trump as he attempts to return to the White House, how do you evaluate that and some of the commentary that it goes along there, this subgroup, hostile to either socialism or communism, or kind of oriented toward a strongman figure?
Yeah, I think it's part of the idea that there is just, it's not monolithic. I think it's very easy to look at any sort of racial or ethnic subgroup and say, Blacks, Latinos, Asians, Pacific Islanders, Jews. But actually, there's a lot of difference and diversity within that subgroup. So I would argue that actually, when you're talking about, for example, communism and socialism, you're actually looking at age differentials that are much bigger, right? The way a younger Latino would think about the issue of communism is very different than, say, someone like my mom who left Cuba, right? She has a very, you know, God rest her soul, she passed away a couple of years ago, but her take on communism was much, much, much different than her grandchildren's take, for example. So I think age plays a big role. And of course, there is a sense of, you know, why do Latino men find Trump more appealing than Latino women? Again, I think we're going to have to wait and see how these comments, what kind of role they play in the impact on voting by Latinos.
Soledad O'Brien, great to spend time with you. Thanks so very much.
My pleasure.